How would you live if you knew this was your last month to live on earth? How would you live? Would you do things different? What would you do if you knew tomorrow you're going to inherit $10 million? How would you live? What would you do today if you knew you're going to inherit that tomorrow? I bet you'd live differently, wouldn't you? What would you do if you knew tomorrow you're going to lose everything you had? You know, just like most farmers, just lose everything you got. How would you live? Well, how would you live? I know I'm asking a lot of silly questions, but I'm trying to get you to thinking in this way. How would you live tomorrow if you knew Jesus was going to come back? How would you live? Okay, today in our study of John chapter 12, we're going to start at about verse 27. Today we're going to be looking at the life of Christ as He gets ready to go to the cross. And today we're going to get the privilege of doing something that very rarely in the Bible do we get this insight. Because in this little few verses today, we really get in the head of Christ. We get into His thinking process. We get to see He's thinking, and I don't know how this got written down, except I suspect that John talked with Him, and Jesus may have shared this with Him. But we have some very insightful stuff into the very mind of Christ today. Jesus is thinking about dying. He's dealing with that. He's asking Himself, how will I do? What will this be like? You know, what's coming? And he's thinking about the end of His life. He's preparing for His death. He's thinking about how He's going to die. And that's all kind of going around in His head. And so we get to, today we're going to look at that, because I want to talk today about, not about dying, but I want to talk about living. How then shall we live is the title of my message today. How do we live? How then shall we live? Because today we are here celebrating Father's Day, and men are thinking about living their lives, of leading their families, of being a blessing in their communities and in their homes. And we're thinking about living and how to make our lives work. Now, add to that the idea that very rarely do we get to know what a real Christian is like. And I say that as an indictment on our culture. We are all copies, bad copies of bad copies of bad copies. And someone once said, Christianity is a really good idea. It's just nobody's ever tried it. You know, to truly live like Christ. And today, how then do we live? How do we live? Where do we find the model? And I think today, as we look into this insight into the mind of Christ, today we're going to get to see what Jesus, how He faced death, how He walked in that direction. And so we're going to need to look into His mind today to find out how to live. Last Sunday, as we walked in this part of John, we found out that we're the hands, we're the feet, we're the mouth, we're the eyes, we're the ears of Christ in the world today. We found out we are. And so that's come to this sermon today is just sort of a piggyback on that. And we're going to go in just in a slightly different direction and in more text. But today we're trying to deal with that. Since we are Jesus in this world today, how then do we live? How do we make this work? How do we model our lives? Now, the first thing I want to talk about today in my outline of the sermon, as we deal with this question, how do we live? I want to start by saying you have to put trouble or difficulty in the right context. You've got to frame your current situation differently. Because if you're not careful, you can let your troubles, your pain, your disappointments, your setbacks, you can let that become what your life is all about. You let that can become the elephant in the room that overshadows everything else, so that you don't get to think about and act on this, how then do we live? How is the best way to live? Because we can get overshadowed by other things. Let's take a text out of verse 27 and see if we can, I'll say more about this in chapter 12, verse 27. This is Jesus. He's sort of thinking in his mind these thoughts. Now my soul is troubled. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, It was for this very reason I came to this hour. You see, Jesus knew that he had come to earth for this particular purpose. He'd come to die for you and I. He had left heaven and condescended down and became a human being and lived among us, but for the purpose of going to Calvary. And this was the weekend that Jesus was heading that way. He came here to die. And so he said, well, should I say to my Father, to myself, my Father, should I say, oh, let's not do this. Let's find another way to get out of this trouble. He didn't say that. He said, no. Why would I do that? It's because for this reason that I came. Now, let me say to you today that no matter what lay ahead for Jesus, he knew that the cross was coming for him. And if we're not careful, we won't be like Christ, and we'll get focused on the wrong things. For instance, when the doctors diagnosed my broken back, it took a while to diagnose it because that's kind of complicated, and X-rays don't show good stuff and stuff. So I was there, and man, they had to put me in awkward positions and difficult, painful. In other words, it was painful to diagnose my problem. It caused me a lot of pain, but I endured the pain knowing that eventually my back would start healing, and by the way, it is. But I endured the pain knowing the outcome would be good health. Now let's go back to Christ just a moment. Jesus knew what was ahead of him. He knew where he was going. But he endured the pain of the cross knowing the outcome. Knowing that if he would do what he was planning to do, that he would literally set us free and give us life. We'd be freed from sin and given life. And so he endured the cross knowing all that was going to happen. I've never had a baby. Has anybody in here had a baby? They tell me, there's a commercial, or not, comedian, a lady comedian that said that having a baby was like taking your bottom lip and stretching it up over your head. That's not very comfortable at all to me. But ladies endure the pain of childbirth because there's a baby. When it's all over, we get something, we get a result. And that's what Jesus did. He came to endure the cross. He wasn't a person that enjoyed pain. He was a human like us. He didn't want to be suffering and die. But he came knowing that the outcome would be you and I. Now, who knows? Just think for just a moment. Look at your situation. Think about where you are today. Where you are in your life. Where you are in your health. Where you are in your financial life. And some of you may not have a very pretty picture in some of those areas today. You may be hurting. But who knows that your entire purpose for being on planet Earth was to be the hand of Christ, the face, the eyes of Christ in this situation. Who knows but that you are here to reveal the glory of the Lord through your current situation. I think if you'll reframe your life and you re-see your troubles through that frame or that lens, that you'll be able to handle your pain much more because you've seen that God put you here for this reason. I'm all the time, people will ask me, or they'll say to me, preacher, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why God put me on earth. I don't know. I don't have particular talents, or I don't have this or that. And we never know. But listen to me. Could it be that maybe you were put here to reveal the glory of the Lord through your difficulties? Maybe it is. So I don't know. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. But we're here for that maybe they're here for that very purpose. See, nobody can paint a very pretty picture with white paint only. It just kind of goes all blah, doesn't it? You need contrast. You need some black, you need some color, you need some different, that you just can't paint with one color. And so our lives don't come in a monochrome form. We come with multicolors, highs and lows, ins and outs, ups and downs, yin and yang. I mean, we get all this together in one life. And that whole thing, the good, the bad, the pain, the joy, all of it, paints the beautiful picture of life. And that's where we reveal Christ, is with our entire life. So, if you're here today and you're hurting or disappointed, frustrated, don't give up. Don't quit. Keep going ahead, because who knows, but that may be why you're put here on the earth, to live through this with glory. Now, the second thing is, If you want to be like Christ and live for the Lord, is you need to reframe your life. The next thing is stay ready to hear God. Stay ready. Now, I believe that God is speaking to every one of us all the time. I don't think He ever stops communicating with us. I think God speaks to us. He leads us through the Holy Spirit. He speaks to us through His Word. He speaks to us through people in our life. I think we're always being bombarded with messages from God. Sadly, many of us are not tuned to the right channel. Or we've got the static so high in our life from difficulties or whatever that we've stopped listening to the Lord. Now today we're going to start reading here in verse 28. And when we do, I want you to notice how Jesus is able to tune in here with all the static going on in His life. And He tunes in and He hears clearly from the Father. Let's read it together. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it and will glorify it again. The crowd that was there and heard it, they heard it said it had thundered. In other words, they said Jesus heard the Father speak, but the crowd there said, oh, it just thundered. Now, that may not sound like much to you, but stay with me for a moment. I'm going to try to unpack that for you to see what that can mean in your life. Let's keep reading. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, this voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now, right now in this cell barn, there are hundreds of radio signals flying around the room. All from Springfield, Joplin, Kansas City, St. Louis, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean, there's all kinds of radio signals flying through the room here. But I bet I don't see any of you that's got a radio tuned to pick up any of those. They're here, but we're not tuned in. You're not listening. You see, we need to tune in to the Lord. Last spring, my wife and I went with some people here in our church, Glenn and Dorothy High and their kids. We went bird watching. I've always been interested in nature, and they found out I was wanting to know more about it. So we went with them on a bird watching trip. We went down to the big woods, and boy, we saw the most beautiful birds. Gorgeous in the spring of the year. But my wife and I, we were busy looking for birds. We had our binoculars, and boy, we looked like bird watchers. I mean, we were scanning the trees for birds. And most of these experts, they weren't necessarily watching, they were listening. And they were hearing birds that we would never see. But they were hearing them, and they would talk about them because they learned how to listen to the right signal. Now, the secret to a happy, productive, powerful life is learning to listen to God, even though there's so much going on in our lives, so much noise. It's learning how to listen is important. See, sometimes God speaks in the thunder. Sometimes He speaks in the still voice after the storm is over. So just listen to Him. You can't, don't try to think you've got Him all figured out. Sometimes in the pain, and sometimes He speaks in the peace that follows later. So I'm going to say to you today, practice listening for a while instead of spending all your time communicating one way. Let me say it like this. I'm going to say something crazy. And I did this a few years back in a church, and I think I've still got some people confused. So I don't want to confuse you. But I'm going to challenge you to try something. Do this only if you want to. But I challenge you to think about it. Take a week and don't pray. Don't take a week and don't say a word to God. But instead of talking to Him, listen. Spend as much time as you normally do. But instead of talking, giving Him, now Lord, do this, then do that. Lord, when you get done, just start over here and go over here, Lord. You know, we get so busy bossing God around. Try to take a week sometime and don't talk. Just listen. Say, God, what do you want to tell me today? Here I am. I'm listening. I'm going to tell you what. If you'll do that, you'll come back a different person because you will hear God speak. Sometimes we just get so busy talking. So make sure you listen to the Lord. Practice listening. The third thing, I'm about done, is that shine the light on Jesus. Shine the light on Jesus. Now, how then shall we live? By taking the focus of everything and turning it on the Lord. Now, let me get back up and tell you what that's not like. Some people are the stars in their own movie all their life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're the hero in your own movie. And you're not interested in anybody else because you want to star in that movie of yourself. Some people want all the glory to come to themselves. Brag on me, look how good I am. Now, let me just stop on that and say, people who live in southwest Missouri, especially those who go to Cowboy Church, you're some of the finest people on earth. I'm serious, you are. You're some of God's very best. You're kind, you're generous, you're loving. You really are good people. And I'm so proud of you. But if we're not careful, we will give the impression that our goodness is self-attained. If we're not careful, we'll shine the light on us. Look how good I am. Look how good the Cowboy Church is. Look how good my church is. Look how good my family is. And we get the focus on the wrong thing. Let's turn the focus back upon Jesus. Would you read with me verse 31 and following? We'll pick a text here for this. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. The crowd spoke up. Now we've heard from the law that Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? Then Jesus told them, you're going to have the light just a little longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of the light. Now, Jesus said here, he said, I've come to this world. I'm going to drive the prince of darkness out. In other words, he's going to end the reign of terror of the devil. He's going to end his reign here on the earth. Now, he's still kicking around, right? He's bothering me this morning. I'm sure he's bothering some of you. I mean, the devil's still here, but he's a whipped pup. He's already been beat. Okay, so Jesus said, I'm going to destroy him, and said, and when I am lifted up, I will draw him into me. Now, he was telling them that he's going to be lifted up on a cross. Now, you and I today wouldn't understand if somebody said, I'm going to be lifted up. But in the Roman days of this time, to be lifted, that was the language that described crucifixion. He said, I'm going to be crucified. And when I'm crucified, I will draw men to me, because my light that has come is going to dispel darkness. People are going to come to the light. And folks, we've been coming for thousands of years now. And so we want to keep the focus on Jesus. Some people center their message on healing or health, wealth, some on doctrine, some on traditions. Now those things are all good in their own right. But if your Christianity is focused on your church or your preacher or your doctrine or your traditions, you've got the light shining on the wrong subject. You need to shine the light on Jesus. He's the one that makes a difference. Some people focus on personalities, cultural relevance, or a dog and pony show. Some churches, that's all they are, is a dog and pony show. And I don't mean to be judgmental, but folks, don't focus on the music or the preaching. Focus on Jesus. He's the key. See, take every person that you meet, wherever they are, in their level of darkness, take them and walk with them to the light. Take them to every time. And listen to me, never ever be ashamed of the cross. There is a tendency today for people to get a little squeamish and call our religion a bloody religion. They say, oh, you people, you preach a bloody religion. We're too sophisticated for that. Let me tell you something. Paul said, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God unto salvation. And I am not ashamed of the cross. Now, if you want to go to a church where they don't talk about blood and guts and torture and pain, you probably find a better church to go to. Because we're going to talk about that here. Because that is what we found. That's what our belief is founded upon. On the sacrifice of Jesus and the miracle of His resurrection. So He is that light. We're going to take it. And if you want to be a part of that, come and go with us. Take His light everywhere you go. And keep going. Because folks, I believe, and I don't want to sound alarming, I've been an alarmist, but I believe the darkness is coming. I believe it's coming. And we can sense it in so many different areas of life. And let's work while we got the day. Now, let me kind of bring this to a conclusion. Here's what you need to know. Because if you start living for Jesus as a true example, not just a flawed copy of a flawed copy, but truly living for Christ, you're going to become discouraged by the people that you're around because their hearts are hardened. We live in a hardened-hearted world today. We've got so much material wealth. We've got so much of everything. We've hardened our hearts. And if we're not careful, we'll be discouraged. But don't be. You keep lifting up the cross. Let me read with you here, verse 36. When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe him. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message? And to whom of the Lord has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason, they could not believe, because as Isaiah says elsewhere, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I will heal them. Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Now, if you would read that, you might be confused, thinking that that is saying to us that God hardens this heart, and he softens that heart, hardens this heart, softens that heart. That might be what you think that's saying there, but it isn't. This is simply reporting the fact that some people's hearts are hardened. They won't listen. If I believed that God picked this one for heaven, and that one for hell, and this one for heaven, that one for hell, I'd go fishing this morning. I wouldn't be here. What good would it be to be here at church if God's already decided what we're going to do, where you're going to be? Well, who cares? It's out of our hands, right? But it is. We've been all selected for eternity. We've been all chosen to be saved. So this is not saying God chooses and rejects. He simply says, whosoever will may come. But sometimes people's hearts get hardened. You may be here this morning with a hardened heart. It can happen. It can happen so easy, so fast. Sometimes you don't even see it coming. And sometimes you don't even know it's hard, and it is. So if you get a glimpse, an insight into your nature, and you see that there's a hardening there, then, well, folks, take that to the Lord and ask God to break down your barriers and to warm you up and bring you back to a place of joy. Now, the last thing I want to say today is sometimes we get discouraged as we try to live for the Lord. How then shall we live? Because we don't get the approval of people around us. In other words, we try to lift up Christ where we work, or we try to lift up Christ in our home, our community, and people respond negatively to that. This is a day when people don't want to hear about anything to do with church and religion. They, don't keep that out of here. This is business. Listen to me, so you're going to find you may be discouraged if you're looking for approval in the wrong place. Now listen carefully. There will be approval for that, but it won't be where you work always, and it won't be in your home always. But listen, we're not here to be approved of by others, but just by Him. I'm going to tell you a little story, then I'm going to read the text and we're done. A guy was a professional musician, and he was starting his first world tour, and he was playing in one of the great concert halls on the East Coast, and he played to a full house, and when he finished playing the great concertos, etc., the audience stood and gave him a standing ovation. They just applauded and applauded. The man stood at the piano, didn't acknowledge the applause, didn't say thank you, didn't bow. He stood and his eyes were fixed at one single spot up in the balcony. Later someone asked him, what were you doing? You didn't acknowledge the applause of that great crowd. You just kept looking up in the balcony. What was going on up there? He said, my old piano teacher was sitting up in the balcony, and I was playing to please him. I was playing to please him. Who are you playing to please? You see, if you're going to try to get approval from everybody here, you're going to be discouraged at this point. Don't live expecting approval here. Let's read verse 42. Yet at the same time, many, even among the leaders, believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. Here it is, verse 43. For they loved human praise more than praise from God. That's the key. You're going to be disappointed if you're looking for praise from everybody around you. Look to the Lord. Look to Him alone, because He is the only one that can save. Listen, if you want to know the Lord today, He's ready. Whosoever will may come. It's that simple. If you want to come and trust Jesus, give Him your life, He is ready, because He came, He died, He's waiting for you to come. Open your life to Him. That's how you live. Open to the Lord. Freely. Completely in Him. If you're ready to give your life to Jesus, He's ready to take you this morning. Amen? Let's pray together.